High Admiral Vex of the Galactic Imperial Fleet stood frozen on the command deck of the Inevitable Dominance, flagship of the 7th Subjugation Fleet. The massive viewscreen before him displayed something impossible. A vessel of unknown design had appeared in the middle of their formation without warning, without transition through hyperspace, without any detectable approach whatsoever. "What am I looking at?" Vex demanded, his 4 arms tensing as he gripped the railings of his elevated command platform. Second Commander Pelk's voice quavered. "Unknown, High Admiral. It simply appeared. Our sensors registered nothing until it was already here." The vessel was unlike anything in Imperial records. Where Imperial ships were elegant, curved, and gleaming with purple-gold alloys, this intruder was angular, matte black, and bristling with what could only be weapons. It was smaller than the Inevitable Dominance, but something about its presence made Vex's dorsal spine stiffen with ancestral warning. "Open communications," Vex ordered, "and bring all weapon systems online." Before the communications officer could comply, every screen on the command deck flickered simultaneously. A face appeared, a face that sent ripples of shock through the command crew. 2 eyes, no scales, soft-looking skin, and a strange growth of fur atop the head. "This is Captain Jack Reed of the United Earth Federation warship Defiance," the creature spoke in perfect galactic standard. "You are currently engaged in hostilities against the independent world of Terrace, which has requested Earth's protection. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences." Vex's secondary hearts began to race. Humans, the mythical species from the quarantined sector. The species that Imperial doctrine specifically forbade contact with. The species that, according to ancient records, had defeated 3 separate advanced civilizations before retreating to their home sector centuries ago. "This is High Admiral Vex of the 7th Imperial Subjugation Fleet. You have entered Imperial space unauthorized. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. The quarantine of your species remains in effect. Compliance is mandatory." The human's expression didn't change, but something in those alien eyes hardened. "High Admiral, I don't think you understand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. You have precisely 5 minutes to begin withdrawal procedures before we consider your intentions hostile." Vex gestured for the communication to be muted. "Status of their weapons systems?" "Unknown configurations, High Admiral," the tactical officer replied. "But energy readings suggest dormant status. They appear to be waiting." Vex allowed himself a smile. The human ship, while unusual, was vastly outmatched. The 7th Fleet comprised 23 capital ships and over 100 support vessels. Whatever technological advantages these humans might possess, they could not hope to stand against such overwhelming force. "Prepare targeting solutions. I want that vessel disabled, not destroyed. The Science Directorate will pay handsomely for intact human technology." As the fleet moved into attack formation, Vex observed the human vessel with growing curiosity. It remained stationary, making no attempt to flee or reposition. Either their tactical systems were primitive, or they possessed confidence bordering on madness. "High Admiral," the sensor officer called out. "We're detecting energy fluctuations from the human vessel." Vex waved dismissively. "Expected. They're preparing defensive measures." "No, sir. The readings are unusual. They appear to be manipulating space-time at quantum levels." Before Vex could process this information, the human vessel began to shimmer, not with shields or defensive barriers, but as though reality itself bent around its hull. Then, in a maneuver that violated every principle of physics the Empire understood, it moved, not forward or backward, but sideways into a dimension the Imperial sensors couldn't comprehend. And then, it was behind them. "All ships, open fire!" Vex roared. But it was too late. The 5-minute ultimatum had barely reached the 3-minute mark when the human warship began its response, and the Galactic Empire was about to learn why humans had been quarantined in the first place. The Defiance moved like nothing the Imperial fleet had ever encountered. Where Imperial vessels required time to accelerate and decelerate, the human ship shifted positions instantly, appearing at different coordinates with no visible transition. Each time it reappeared, precision weapon strikes disabled another Imperial vessel. They're using some form of dimensional shifting technology, the science officer reported frantically. Not hyperspace, not wormhole technology, something entirely different. Vex watched in mounting horror as the judicial authority, one of his most powerful cruisers, lost propulsion, weapons, and communications in 3 precise strikes that lasted less than 10 seconds. The human ship hadn't destroyed it, just rendered it completely helpless. All vessels concentrate fire on predicted reappearance points, Vex ordered, knowing even as he spoke that such tactics were useless against an enemy that didn't move through normal space. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the planet Terrace, the communications officer reported. They're celebrating. On the tactical display, 12 more Imperial vessels suddenly went dark as systems failed across their hulls. The human vessel was systematically neutralizing the entire fleet without killing a single Imperial crew member. Captain Reed's face appeared on the command screen again. Hi, Admiral. This is your final warning. The next phase will not be non-lethal. Begin your withdrawal now. Vex's pride warred with his tactical assessment. The human ship had disabled 15 capital vessels without taking a single hit. His fleet's most advanced targeting systems couldn't lock onto a vessel that didn't obey the laws of physics. Transmission from Imperial Command, High Admiral, the communications officer announced. Priority Alpha. The screen split to reveal the stern face of Grand Marshal Kridoth. Vex, what in the 7 hells is happening? We're receiving data showing your fleet is being systematically disabled by a single vessel. Grand Marshal, we've encountered a human warship. They possess technology beyond humans, Kridoth interrupted, genuine fear crossing his features. Order immediate withdrawal. That's a direct order from the Emperor himself. Disengage immediately. The command deck fell silent. The Emperor personally ordering a retreat was unprecedented. With respect, Grand Marshal, we still have numerical superiority. If we coordinate, this is not a debate, Vex. The quarantine protocols exist for a reason. The last time an Imperial force engaged humans, we lost an entire sector. Begin withdrawal. Procedures immediately. As Kridoth's transmission ended, the sensor officer called out, High Admiral, the human vessel is deploying something. Small objects had begun emerging from the Defiance, each no larger than a personal transport. As they accelerated toward the Imperial fleet, they began multiplying, each one splitting into 2 identical copies, those 2 becoming 4, 4 becoming 8. What are those? Vex demanded. Some form of self-replicating autonomous weapons. Platform. The tactical officer responded. They're using local matter to duplicate themselves. Within minutes, thousands of the devices surrounded the fleet, each one orienting weapons toward an Imperial vessel. All ships, begin withdrawal procedures, Vex ordered, his voice hollow. Set course for the nearest Imperial stronghold. As the Imperial fleet began its humiliating retreat, Vex watched the human warship maintain position above Terrace. For centuries, the Empire had expanded unchallenged across the galaxy. Now, a single ship had forced them to abandon an entire campaign. The most disturbing thought wasn't the technological gap. It was the realization that if this was what humans could achieve with one ship, what could their unified forces accomplish? And worse yet, this defeat would not go unnoticed by the Empire's other subjects. 3 days after the Imperial retreat from Terrace, Vex stood before the Galactic Imperial Council, 23 of the most powerful beings in the known universe. The Emperor himself, Lord Therex VI, sat at the center, his crystalline exoskeleton glittering under the chamber lights. Explain how a single vessel forced the retreat of an entire subjugation fleet, the Emperor demanded, his voice reverberating. Through the chamber, Vex displayed the sensor readings they had managed to capture. The human vessel utilized technology we've theorized but never achieved. Phase-shifting capabilities that allowed it to move through dimensions beyond our detection capabilities. Additionally, they deployed self-replicating autonomous weapons, using matter conversion on a scale our science directorate has deemed impossible. Grand Marshal Kridoth stepped forward. The quarantine of human space has stood for 3 centuries for precisely this reason. After the Melvorian Empire was dismantled, by human forces, the 3-galaxy accord established boundaries that have protected us all. Then how did they come to be at Taurus? Asked Councillor Zith, her tendrils writhing with agitation. Intelligence suggests the humans have been quietly establishing relationships with border worlds, Kridoth explained. offering protection in exchange for trade rights and cultural exchange. The Empire's expansion has apparently triggered their defensive protocols. The Emperor's compound eyes fixed on Vex. What is your assessment of their military capability? Vex chose his words carefully. The vessel we encountered displayed technological superiority that suggests our entire fleet might not be sufficient if they deploy in force. More concerning is that they disabled our vessels without destruction. They were demonstrating restraint, not maximum capability. Murmurs spread through the council chamber. We have intercepted transmissions from Terrace, Intelligence Director Foss added. The human captain informed their leadership that this was merely an expeditionary force, and that a diplomatic delegation would arrive within 20 standard cycles to formalize their protection agreement. The Emperor rose, silencing the chamber. For centuries, we've expanded the Empire's borders without meaningful resistance. Now we face a species with technology that renders our military advantage obsolete. We must learn more before deciding our course. He turned to Vex. Hi, Admiral, I am reassigning you. You will take command of our border observation post near the human quarantine zone. Learn everything you can about their capabilities and intentions. As you command, Emperor, Vex acknowledged, recognizing both the demotion and the opportunity it represented. As the council session concluded, Vex was approached by Science Director Malk, an ancient being whose natural form required a complex support apparatus. The humans call it Ansible technology, Malk whispered, his voice synthesized through mechanical means. My predecessor's notes contain theoretical frameworks for manipulating reality at quantum levels. Technology we abandoned as impractical centuries ago. The humans appear to have not only perfected it, but weaponized it. What can you tell me about them? Vex asked. They evolved on a high-gravity death world with extreme environmental variation. Their biological adaptability translated to technological adaptability. Most concerning is their response to existential threats. They don't merely survive them, they emerge stronger. The quarantine was established not to protect the galaxy from human aggression, but to give the rest of us time to catch up. Vex absorbed this with growing unease. And now we've given them reason to look outward again. Precisely, Malk confirmed. The three civilizations that challenged humans directly no longer exist as sovereign powers. We must not make the same mistake. As Vex departed for his new assignment, a disturbing thought formed. What if the appearance of one human warship wasn't the beginning of a conflict, but the end of an era of Imperial expansion? The Imperial Observation Station. Vigilant Eye orbited, the dead moon of a gas giant at the very edge of Imperial space, just 3 light-years from the border of what had come to be known as human space. For Vex, the posting was both punishment and opportunity, an acknowledgement of his failure at Terrace, but also recognition of his first-hand experience with human technology. 6 months into his assignment, Vex stared at the latest intelligence reports with growing concern. 17 worlds along the Imperial border had established formal relations with the humans. Trade routes were being established. Cultural exchanges had begun. Most alarming, several previously loyal Imperial client worlds had requested revised status within the Empire, citing the Terrace incident as evidence that Imperial protection was not as absolute as claimed. Another transmission from Proxima Station, High Admiral, Lieutenant Jax announced, interrupting Vex's thoughts. The message contained footage that confirmed Vex's worst fears. A human delegation had arrived at Proxima, one of the Empire's most important trade hubs. Not in a warship this time, but in what they called a diplomatic vessel. Though sensors indicated its technological capabilities were no less impressive than the Defiance. They're being welcomed, Vex noted with disbelief as he watched Imperial citizens lining the spaceport to greet the human arrivals. Yes, sir. Public opinion has shifted dramatically since Terrace. The humans have made no aggressive moves, but their technological demonstrations have been impactful. The footage showed a human engineer casually repairing an Imperial power core that would have taken Imperial technicians months to fix. Another segment displayed humans introducing medical technology that instantly healed injuries. They're not conquering us, Vex realized. They're seducing us, making themselves indispensable. Commander Pelk, who had requested reassignment to follow Vex, nodded grimly. The Imperial Ministry of Information has tried to restrict news about human technology, but it's spreading faster than they can contain it. Vex turned to the classified portion of the report. What about the Emperor's special project? Project Eclipse continues at the Imperial Science Directorate. They believe they've made progress reverse engineering some principles of human phase shift technology, but practical application remains years away. A notification flashed on Vex's terminal. What's this? A vessel approaching from outside Imperial space? Confirmed, High Admiral, the sensor officer reported. It's broadcasting on standard frequencies. Sir, it's identifying itself as a human vessel. The diplomatic envoy. Vex felt his scales tighten against his skin. Heading? Directly for this station, sir. Battle stations, Vex ordered automatically. Sir, Pelk interjected. They're broadcasting a message specifically addressed to you. By name. On the main view screen, a human face appeared. Not Captain Reed this time, but an older human with white fur on its head and face. High Admiral Vex. I am Ambassador Thomas Gray of the United Earth Federation. I request permission to dock at your station for a discussion of mutual interest. I come alone, in a small shuttle, unarmed. Vex hesitated. Protocol demanded he refuse and report the contact attempt to Imperial Command. Yet, curiosity, the same curiosity that had driven his species to the stars, compelled him to consider. Scan the vessel, he ordered. Confirmed single life form, the sensor officer reported. The vessel is powered by technology we can't fully analyze, but weapons systems appear inactive. Vex made his decision. Grant permission to dock. Security. Protocols Alpha 3. I'll meet this ambassador personally. As he made his way to the docking bay, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next would change the course of the Empire. Forever. What he couldn't know was that the human wasn't coming to negotiate. He was coming to warn them. The human ambassador stood several inches shorter than Vex, yet somehow managed to project a presence that filled the conference room. Ambassador Gray had politely submitted to security scans, surrendered a small communication device, and requested nothing more than water, which Imperial medical staff confirmed was simply hydrogen and oxygen in molecular form, harmless to the human physiology. I appreciate you receiving me, High Admiral, Gray began, his voice carrying the weight of authority despite its alien timbre, especially given the circumstances of our species' first official contact. The Empire has questions. About your presence outside your designated sector, Vex replied, maintaining formal protocol. The Three-Galaxy Accord established boundaries that have been respected for centuries. Gray nodded, taking a sip of water before responding. Boundaries that were established unilaterally, without human participation or consent. But that's history. Now, I've come with information critical to both our civilizations. I'm listening. 3 months ago, one of our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim. We've since confirmed that a force is approaching, one that appears to have consumed or conquered at least 7 galaxies, before reaching ours. Vex's secondary hearts quickened their pace. You expect me to believe an extragalactic threat just happens to appear now, when humans are expanding beyond their borders for the first time in centuries? Gray placed a small device on the table that projected a holographic display of swirling galaxies. This data was compiled from our Ansible network, which can detect ripples in space-time across distances your sensors cannot yet reach. The pattern is unmistakable. Systematic harvesting of entire star systems moving in our direction. The display zoomed in to show something that made Vex's scales bristle. Entire solar systems going dark in sequence, a wave of nothingness advancing toward the Milky Way. We call them the Harvesters, Gray continued. They convert all matter they encounter into energy to fuel their expansion. They aren't conquerors or invaders in any sense we understand. They're more like a cosmic wildfire, consuming everything in their path. If this is true, Vex said cautiously, why bring this information to me? I'm merely a border station commander. Because you've encountered our technology firsthand. You understand what the rest of the Imperial hierarchy doesn't yet comprehend. That despite appearances, humans and the Empire are not as technologically disparate as the Taris incident suggested. Gray leaned forward. The technology displayed by the Defiance represents our most advanced capabilities, developed over centuries of isolation. But against what's coming, even that won't be enough. Not alone. Vex studied the human's face, searching for signs of deception but finding none. You're proposing cooperation? I'm proposing survival. The harvesters will reach the outer edge of the galaxy within 5 years. No single civilization, not humans, not the Empire, not anyone, has the resources to face this alone. The implications struck Vex like a gravity wave. If the humans were telling the truth, everything changed. If they were lying, what exactly are you asking of the Empire? First, acknowledge the sovereignty of worlds that choose alliance with Earth. Second, establish a joint technological exchange program focused on defensive capabilities. Third, and most importantly, help us convince the other major powers of the galaxy that this threat is real before it's too late. Gray's expression grew solemn. The quarantine served its purpose, High Admiral. It gave humans time to develop in isolation and the galaxy time to stabilize after our disruptive emergence. But that era must end now. Division means extinction. As Vex contemplated the human's words, his communication device signaled an urgent message from Imperial Command. He excused himself and stepped away to receive it. The message was brief, but shocking. Long-range Imperial probes had detected unusual energy patterns at the galaxy's edge, patterns unlike anything in Imperial records. When Vex returned to the table, his decision was made. I will convey your information to the Emperor personally. If verified, I believe he will see the wisdom in cooperation. Gray nodded solemnly. Thank you, High Admiral. The United Earth Federation stands ready. As the human prepared to depart, Vex was left with one burning question. Ambassador, why didn't you approach the Emperor directly? Why come to this remote station? Gray smiled slightly. Because according to our intelligence, you're the only high-ranking Imperial officer who hasn't dismissed humans as a temporary concern. You saw what one ship could do, and instead of seeking revenge, you sought understanding. The defiance at Taris was a demonstration, wasn't it? Not of your military power, but of your technological capability. Yes, we needed the galaxy to pay attention. Gray looked Vex directly in the eyes. We've been watching the Harvesters approach for decades, High Admiral. Everything we've done has been preparation for what's coming. The Imperial Palace on my Therix Prime hummed with unprecedented activity. For the first time in living memory, the Grand Conclave Chamber hosted representatives from every major galactic power. The Empire, the Federated Worlds, the Consortium of Free Systems, the Alkari, Dominion, and even delegations from dozens of independent worlds. At the center of it all, standing beside Emperor Therix VI himself, was a human delegation led by Ambassador Gray. High Admiral Vex, recently promoted to Imperial High Command, watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation as ancient enemies sat together, united by a common threat that most had only recently acknowledged as real. The latest projections confirm the Harvester front will reach the outer systems within 4 standard years, the human scientist, Dr. Lane, explained, manipulating a holographic display that filled the chamber. Their advance shows no deviation in pattern or purpose across 7 consumed galaxies. And we're certain they cannot be communicated with? Asked the Alkari Prime Minister, her feathered crest rising with concern. 17 attempts at communication have been made using every known method, Dr. Lane confirmed. The Harvesters respond only by accelerating consumption of the communication source. Emperor Therix VI rose from his throne, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light. For millennia, our civilizations have fought over territories and resources within this galaxy. Now we face the prospect of having no galaxy at all. He gestured toward the human delegation. 3 centuries ago, human military capabilities threatened the established order. The quarantine was our response, not from fear, but from recognition, that uncontrolled technological advancement posed dangers to all. Now, that same advancement may be our salvation. Ambassador Gray stepped forward. The United Earth Federation offers full technological exchange with all powers represented here. Ansible communications, phase shift propulsion, matter conversion, everything we have developed will be shared in exchange for unified defense coordination. Murmurs spread through the chamber as the implications sank in. The humans were offering technology that would revolutionize every aspect of galactic civilization. Technology that, until recently, they had jealously guarded. "Why should we trust this sudden generosity?" demanded the consortium representative. "How do we know these harvesters aren't a human fabrication to gain dominance?" Vex stepped forward. "Imperial deep space probes have independently verified the harvester presence. Furthermore, the Science Directorate has completed analysis of the human data. It is authentic. Even if we pool all our resources and technology," the Alkari Prime Minister noted, "the projections suggest we can at best slow the harvester advance, not stop it." Dr. Lane nodded grimly. "That's correct with current technology. But there is one possibility we haven't discussed." She manipulated the display to show a mysterious energy signature. "Our Ansible network detected this anomaly at the center of the harvester swarm, what we believe is their central processor or control system." "You're suggesting a targeted strike?" Vex asked, immediately grasping the implications. "Precisely. Combined human and Imperial phase shift technology could potentially deliver a concentrated antimatter payload directly into the harvester core, bypassing their defensive systems. But it would require resources beyond what any single civilization could provide." The Emperor's compound eyes surveyed the assembled delegates. 3 centuries ago, we chose isolation over conflict. Today, we must choose unity over extinction. One by one, the representatives rose to signal agreement. Treaties that would have taken decades to negotiate were drafted in days. Technology that would have been hoarded was freely shared. Military forces that had opposed each other for generations began training together. In the midst of these historic developments, Vex found himself working closely with Captain Reed of the Defiance, the same human who had humiliated his fleet at Terrace. "I never thought I'd see this day," Reed commented, as they reviewed tactical simulations for the planned strike against the Harvester Corps. "Necessity creates unusual allies," Vex replied. Reed smiled slightly. "Would it surprise you to know that humans have a saying? 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.'" "An oversimplification," Vex observed, "but not without merit." As they continued their work, Vex realized that humanity's appearance from isolation had never been about conquering the galaxy. It had been about saving it. The human warship that appeared out of nowhere hadn't just challenged the Galactic Empire. It had awakened it to a greater purpose. And as the combined fleet began to assemble, the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen, Vex couldn't help but wonder if perhaps this had been humanity's plan all along. The combined galactic fleet assembled at the edge of the Cygnus Arm, a force unprecedented in size and diversity. 5,000 capital ships, 20,000 support vessels, and countless smaller craft formed a defensive line against the approaching harvester swarm. At the heart of this armada, the human flagship Unity, built with technology from all major powers, prepared to lead the attack on the harvester core. High Admiral Vex commanded the Imperial contingent from the Bridge of the Indomitable Will, a next-generation battleship incorporating human phase shift technology with Imperial weapons systems. Beside him stood Captain Reed, now serving as liaison between human and Imperial forces. "Energy signatures indicate the harvester front will arrive in approximately 6 hours, Reed reported, studying the tactical display. "And the strike team?" Vex asked. "Ready." Ambassador Gray insisted on leading it himself. Vex hadn't expected that. "The ambassador is a diplomat, not a soldier." Reed's expression turned solemn. "Before he was an ambassador, Thomas Gray was admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet for 20 years. He's been preparing for this moment longer than anyone." A communication alert chimed, and Emperor Therix's image appeared on the main view screen, broadcasting to the entire fleet. "Defenders of the galaxy," the Emperor began, his normally commanding voice subdued with gravity. "Today we face an enemy that threatens not just our territories or our peoples, but existence itself. For too long, we defined ourselves by our differences. Today, we are defined by our common purpose." The transmission shifted to include leaders from each major power, speaking in turn, until finally focusing on Ambassador, now Admiral Gray, standing on the bridge of the Unity. 3 centuries ago, humanity retreated from galactic affairs after conflicts that nearly destroyed us all, Gray stated. "We turned inward, developing technologies to ensure our survival. We watched as the Empire expanded, as the Alkari evolved, As the consortium grew, we prepared not for war against you, but for war alongside you against a threat we detected generations ago. Gray's eyes seemed to meet those of every being watching. The harvesters consume all in their path not out of malice or hunger, but because that is their nature. Today, we show them the nature of sentient life, cooperation, adaptation, and the unyielding will to exist. As the transmission ended, Vex turned to Reed. Your people knew about the harvesters before you revealed yourselves at Terrace, didn't they? Reed nodded. For almost a century, our long-range Ansible network detected them consuming the Andromeda galaxy. Every technological advancement we've made since has been with this day in mind. Even the quarantine? Especially the quarantine. We needed time to develop without interference, and the galaxy needed time to stabilize after our disruptive emergence. The tactical officer interrupted. High Admiral, Harvester Vanguard detected on approach. They've accelerated beyond projected speeds. All vessels, battle formation Omega, Vex commanded. Phase shift defenses online. The forward screens showed the first wave of harvesters. Not ships in any conventional sense, but massive crystalline structures that pulsed with energy as they converted matter to fuel. They moved with eerie coordination, like cells in a single organism. Strike team launching, Reed announced as the Unity released a specialized vessel carrying Admiral Gray and a joint team of the galaxy's best scientists and warriors. What followed was combat unlike anything in recorded history. The harvesters attacked not with conventional weapons, but by attempting to break down and absorb the Allied ships. The combined fleet responded with technologies born from the merger of a dozen different scientific traditions. Phase shift barriers that prevented matter conversion, Ansible-guided weapons that struck with impossible precision, and regenerative hull systems that repaired damage almost instantly. For hours, the battle hung in perfect balance, the Allies losing ships, but slower than anticipated. The harvesters continuing their advance, but hampered by resistance unlike any they had encountered before. Then, at the critical moment, Admiral Gray's voice came through the communication system. Strike team in position. Phase shift jump to Harvester Core commencing in 30 seconds. Vex ordered all Imperial ships to provide covering fire, creating a diversion that drew Harvester attention away from the strike team's position. The Unity coordinated similar actions from the other fleets. Phase shift complete, Gray reported, his voice now strained. We're inside the core structure, antimatter payload armed, but we've encountered something unexpected. Static interfered with the transmission as Gray continued. The core contains records. The harvesters weren't created. They evolved. From a machine civilization that faced extinction and programmed their survival instinct too well. They've been running on automatics for millions of years, consuming to prevent their own extinction. Can you still complete the mission? Vex asked urgently. Yes, but we're modifying the payload. Dr. Lane believes we can reprogram rather than destroy. Give me 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes stretched into eternity as the fleet continued to battle the harvester drones. Ships were lost on both sides, heroes made and sacrificed. Then, without warning, every harvester structure simultaneously froze in space. Core reprogramming successful, Gray's exhausted voice announced. We've rewritten their base directive, from consume to survive to preserve all life to ensure survival. It'll take time to be certain, but preliminary data suggests the harvesters are standing down. Across the combined fleet, celebration erupted, different expressions in different species, but all sharing the same profound relief and triumph. In the days that followed, as the harvester structures began to disperse and the immediate threat receded, representatives from all galactic powers gathered on neutral Terrace, where it had all begun, to formalize what would become known as the Galactic Concord. High Admiral Vex stood beside Admiral Gray as the treaty was signed, establishing not just peace, but genuine cooperation among previously hostile powers. The technology sharing that had begun out of necessity would continue by choice, ushering in what historians would later call the Great Renaissance. You planned this outcome from the beginning, Vex observed quietly to Gray. Not the harvesters, of course, but humanity's return to galactic affairs as partners rather than conquerors. Gray smiled slightly. We learned our lessons centuries ago, Admiral Vex. True power isn't demonstrated through domination, but through collaboration. When that human warship appeared at Terrace, it wasn't just to protect one world, it was to begin the process of saving all worlds. As Vex looked out at the representatives of a now united galaxy, he reflected that the Empire had indeed been unprepared, not for war with humanity, but for the peace and prosperity that would follow when ancient enemies finally recognized their common destiny among the stars. The human warship that had appeared out of nowhere hadn't been an ending, but a beginning.